A Corruption Watch report has highlighted failures in the administration of the Temporary Employment Relief Scheme. The report highlighted the experiences of 126 whistleblowers allegedly shortchanged by employers in delivering what was promised as temporary economic relief. This is during the COVID-19 pandemic. The report showed that 77 of the reports were from employees who suspected their employers had pocketed the TERS money instead of paying it over to them. Joining us now for more on the story is Executive Director of Corruption Watch, David Lewis. David, a very good evening to you and thank you so much for your time. Now, we know that the TERS benefit scheme was one of those that was riddled with great problems and also with fraud. And you've been trying to get to the bottom of where some of these problems may have been emanating from. What did you find?
We had at the time of writing the reports 126 people who reported to us instances of corruption or maladministration. And this, bore out an earlier report by the Auditor General in which they found really significant corruption and maladministration figures. And the corruption we found, or these whistleblowers reported to us, had occurred mostly at the instance of employers who received the benefit and didn't hand them over or handed over only a fraction of the benefit. Employees of the Labour Department who it's alleged were bribed to look the other way when breaches of labour law were committed in relation to these benefits. And then middlemen who tempted and oftentimes succeeded in interspersing themselves between the intended beneficiary and the UIF, which was paying out this benefit, and offered them assistance in accessing the benefit. And I can understand why, when so many of the benefits arrived incredibly late to desperate people, that they would have, accepted the offers of these middlemen who then were not to be seen again, which is not an uncommon practice in accessing state benefits. And then there was massive, which the Auditor General has documented, there was massive maladministration. I can't remember the exact figure, but I think altogether about 41 billion rand was paid out, and the amount of money that was paid out to people who didn't have the correct ID numbers or didn't cite the correct ID numbers amounted in the Auditor General's calculation to something of the order of 800 million. And I agree with what Judge Zondo said at the end of that last the last clip that you showed, and that is that, although we know that maladministration doesn't necessarily amount to corruption, it's something to be concerned of in and of itself. And when it amounts to corruption, when it amounts to maladministration of that scale, I'm afraid I can't help my suspicious nature believing that there may have been something more than simply maladministration involved.
Of course, a part of what we learn from the TERS experience, David, is the extent to which corruption has become endemic in our society. Because it wasn't just on the part of the administrators or a few individuals within the administrators of the fund, but you saw it trickle right down to employers and the extent to which they would give some workers the benefit and withheld it from some. And even to date, some employees have not been tracked down. Do you have confidence in the work that the UIF is currently doing under its Follow the Money project to be able to recoup some of those funds from these scrupulous employers?
I don't know. I mean, I do know, and I haven't seen follow-ups to that story, that at the time, the head of the Unemployment Insurance Fund, the UIF, and I think 3 other senior employees of the UIF were suspended, and I don't know what's come of that. But what I do know, Kathy, is that you'll recall that at the time the corruption in the procurement and the distribution of personal protective equipment was was uncovered, how outraged the population were that that people could go as low as stealing effectively withholding and stealing protective equipment from nurses and frontline health workers. And they are going to be equally outraged, or should be equally outraged by this. You know, it's pleasing in some ways that a population that has seen the VBS bank scandal, the Stina laundry scandal, can still remain outraged. But it's important to do so because we're about to see the biggest procurement and distribution of all, and that's in the procurement and distribution of vaccines. And we're engaging with the Treasury and the Department of Health to try and predict in advance where the vulnerabilities for corruption are and to plug them, you know, because it's really enough already. It's enough of stealing from the poor, stealing from the vulnerable, and the procurement for and the payouts in this instance, the payout of benefits in the COVID pandemic has really outlined there is no place low enough for corrupt people to stoop. This is not stealing from the rich or from some big parastatal, not that that's to be overlooked. This is truly stealing from people who are very, very desperate.
Corruption Watch's David Lewis, let's leave it there for tonight. Thanks for your time.